Today on the podcast, I'm excited to have Emily from Iowa joining me today. Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Emily from Iowa. Okay, how did I connect with an amazing young woman from Iowa?
Well, I think I was actually listening to Kate Warman's podcast and you came on about your Are You Really Okay book. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I initially heard about you through that and then bought the book. And then I bought the Reset book and read those and started listening to your podcasts and following Instagram. And then your Instagram popped up about asking a few questions. So I figured I'd pop in and ask my question.
And here you are. It's so nice to connect with you face to face and get to know you. We're in the middle of a soul care series, and the topic of nourish, that's the rhythm that we're going to focus on today, kind of caught your eye. Tell me why that caught your eye and what you were hoping to unpack with me today.
Yeah, so I feel like I do well at nourishing, but also doing like struggle with the nourish area of just, having a healthy diet, not taking it too far, exercising, not taking it too far. So I think my question is with the area of nourish, is there a point where you can take it too far? Because I know a lot of times it's spoken about not going far enough, but can you also swing too far the other direction?
I think that's a really good question. And I think the bottom line answer is yes. You can take it too far. Just like with anything in life, it's about balance. But I'm curious why you ask. That's my first question to you. Do you feel like you've been in a season where you've taken it too far? And if so, what did that look like?
Yeah, so a year, I'd say a year and a half ago, I went into a season where it started out healthy and then I almost got borderline obsessed with it. Of I started an exercise program with one of my friends. It was amazing. But then it got to a point of like I wouldn't stop and I was working all day um and it was very physical the work that I was doing. But then at night, no matter how tired I was, I had to do the workout. I had to do the workout, had to do the exercise. Um, Eating wise, I would say I actually probably wasn't quite as healthy, but at the same point, I was getting focused on the exercise, being healthier, being more fit, and also like, oh, I'm not eating right. I have to eat this way, do this, add more protein, all like that, and almost getting obsessed with all of that kind of stuff and having to do it.
Yeah. So it became kind of a control thing, having to do these rhythms and kind of almost legalistic about it, not breaking the rules and no matter how you felt at the end of the day, having to practice your exercise routine. So how did it start making you feel? Like how did it start impacting your body, your mind, your emotions?
I think it was, in a way, for me, it was also a good coping mechanism. Just like if there were things going on, I could use it to work it out. But at the same point, I was ignoring my body's signals, which is where it was becoming an issue.
Tell me
Um,
how. What do you mean by that?
just if I was tired, if I was sore, I I'd continue to push through, but also then that's putting more stress on the body, and that was
Right.
putting more stress on it. And I mean, it's also wise to not ignore the injury or ignore the issue that's happening.
Right. So generally speaking, when it comes to ignoring your body's signals in general, do you feel like you're the type of person who, generally speaking, ignores your body's signals?
Yes, very much so. I would say I'm definitely a person that even if my body's giving the signal, I will just continue to push through and go. I think a little bit of that goes how I was raised.
Yeah,
Growing
tell
up
me
on a
about
farm
that.
yeah, growing up on the farm and stuff, when there's animals to be cared for and stuff, it is the job that needs to be done. And I mean, if you're sick, the animals still need to be fed and cared for. And I think that's where a little bit of ignoring the body signals has come from. I've also seen like it been said where we, a generation of like kids that grew up in the farm have to learn to be okay, not like to be okay to stop,
Mm,
because we've been raised in the culture of just go, 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 have to push, get the work done.
right. No breaks, no vacation. Like
Yeah,
it just keeps going. And it's your
there's,
responsibility. You're absolutely right. It's a culture. It is a culture. And I actually have glimpsed that culture because I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is like farm country. Everything from Amish to just your regular farmers with dairy farms and produce and beef farms and all kinds of things. And there's a culture of this unbelievably high work ethic that almost has no limits. It's like as
mhm.
long as the sun's up, that's the limit. It's not how do I feel? What's going on inside of me? And so I can see how you kind of start to adopt the narrative that it doesn't matter how I feel. I just have to do it until it's done.
Yeah. And I think another factor of it is I've seen it where kids that have grown up that way, the farming, like it's not their thing and the agriculture isn't. Whereas in my situation, like it is also a passion of mine. So then you find yourself, or I find myself pushing to kind of see where that limit is, which is not a healthy thing necessarily because it's not always a good thing to find your breaking point. I mean, that's not necessarily healthy.
Right. Right. Because your breaking point just means that you've reached empty,
Hmm.
right? You have this capacity and you've maxed it out. And usually when we reach breaking point, something breaks. So in order to fix it and get it back up and running, it takes more time from us and more energy than if we would have just practiced preventative maintenance to begin with, right? Think about all your farm equipment. It's like preventative maintenance because if we just push this till it breaks, it's a bigger problem. It's more expensive, it's more work, it's more energy in the long run for everybody. And I think you have to view your body in the same way. So here's what's interesting about this, Emily. In order for you to have a healthy balance with nourish, you have to practice the other rhythms as well. Because I hear you saying you've kind of taken the nourish rhythm and run with it as if that's the one and only rhythm that's going to help you. And I get that because our culture puts a high emphasis on taking care of your body. When I say our culture, I don't mean Christian culture. We put a low emphasis on that. But generally speaking, if you turn on the TV, look through a magazine, watch a commercial, there's a high emphasis on taking care of your body. And these days, especially on Instagram with whole foods and exercise and eating lifestyles and diet plans and workout routines and resistance training and, CrossFit and all of that, we put such a high emphasis on that one aspect. But if you only focus on that and neglect the other five boundaries, ding, 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 that would help a little bit. Rest, that would help a little bit. Connection, that would help. Savoring life. And the fifth one, tuning in to how you feel and the signals your body is trying to communicate. So if I focus on nourish, but I'm also practicing tune in, it will really help balance me out. If I'm focusing on nourish, but I'm also practicing protect by learning to set boundaries, I'm also practicing rest by learning to pace myself, then the nourish portion is not going to get out of balance. It's when I'm practicing nourish only as if that's the one and only thing that fills me up, when really it's just part of the equation of living filled. And I
Mhm.
think that's where you got stuck.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I focused too much on that. And I've slowly, like this summer, actually become to a point of I need to value my connections and be more intentional because I had found myself losing myself in the work and the workouts and like all that kind of stuff. And yeah, you can have connections within work and within the business area, but that's not a true, deep personal connection.
Right. It's not a
So
filling connection.
no, it's more of a connection where it feels like, so if it's within business, because I run a business as well, um, it almost feels like they're just taking. You're not getting poured back into and given to. So
Right.
sometimes you feel emotionally exhausted because you're giving to everyone else, but it's not like you're receiving or able to
Exactly.
receive.
Right. So tell me about other times that you've kind of ignored the signals. If the narrative that you have believed is push through, don't be weak, get it done. Like that's kind of the underlying narrative. What other areas or other ways have you also ignored your body's signals?
I I feel like I ignore my body's signal to rest a lot. Sitting for a day and not doing much to me just feels unacceptable. If I've done that, I just feel like I've had a lazy day. And I don't I've taught myself that that's not okay.
Yeah,
Which so for someone to say it's okay for you to stop. I in my mind can tell or like I can tell myself that it's okay to stop, but I've trained myself that it's not okay. So then I feel like, well, I have to do something. I can't
right.
just sit.
Yeah. And I think it's also less about sitting and more about resting and receiving. What does it look like for you to rest and receive? When you respond, when you start to tune into your body's signal of, I'm tired, how do you respond to that signal? How do you rest and receive and fill up? Because maybe just sitting, like I'm just imagining you stopping your day and sitting in a chair and just twiddling your thumbs. Obviously, that's not going to be the most restful thing, but what is actually restful and life-giving and filling for you?
Uh, well, I've joined a few like post-college young adult groups, and I've been finding that that in itself is so filling.
So deeper
Just,
connections.
yeah, deeper connections, sitting together, just having a good time, no motive or anything, just enjoying being with people.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm extroverted and introverted at the same time. So after a long day of business or like working with people and stuff like that, I find my rest and relaxation is to sit down and watch a TV show. But also there's times where that rest and relaxation is going and hanging out with that group of people. Sometimes I don't necessarily feel like doing it, but after I've done it, it was like that was the right move to make.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Sometimes you don't feel like doing it, maybe because you've worked your body too hard that
Hmm.
day. So your body is like, I've given you all I can give you, but your emotions are depleted and they need to be filled.
Yeah. And
So
then
all
sometimes
of that comes with kind of an awareness of what we need, where we need limits, and then pursuing things that are actually filling.
yeah. And sometimes I feel like I don't always go hang out because I know I'm tired and then I'm not going to present myself as when you've worked all day and you're tired, like physically and mentally, you're not going to show up as 100%.
Yeah,
And just learning to be okay with that.
right, right. I don't have to be 100%. This isn't that same mindset of go, go, go. work really hard, do your best, because you're trying to rewrite that narrative
Yeah.
and bring what you can, bring your best, but your best isn't always 100%. That's what's
Mhm.
interesting. There's a whole chapter in soul care where I talk about the 85% rule and how if you actually unpack Sabbath, the seventh day, in terms of percentages, it's about 85% of work. And how sometimes we live in a way where we feel like we have to do 100%. But just like with our budget, if you spend every penny of your paycheck and you don't have any margin, you're going to find yourself bankrupt at some point because there's going to be some sort of emergency, some unexpected expense, and you don't have the margin for it. And I think it goes the same with life and our energy expenditure. We can give our best and still live at 85% and learn to say no to certain things so that we have the margin when unexpected things come up, the emotional bandwidth and the energy to keep giving versus I am just constantly on E and I can't ever handle one more thing. And when things do come in, it takes me over the edge to an unhealthy place. But all of that means being really in tune to why we do what we do to begin with. And I think for you, tracing it back to the farm culture is part of that work for you of what in farm culture is good, and I'm going to take it, and what parts of farm life thinking are unhealthy and could actually sabotage me if I continue to think in this way without ever questioning it. Because just because something is cultural doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't
Mhm.
mean it's the way of Jesus, doesn't mean it's what's best for us. And so we have to challenge the cultural narrative. Even Jesus during his time had to challenge the cultural narratives because just because it's culture doesn't mean I just accept it and do it and repeat it. It could actually be unhealthy.
Mhm.
Besides farm culture, I'm curious to know about your like siblings and family dynamic.
Yeah, so I actually have 5 sisters.
Wow.
Yep. And I have a whole bunch of nieces and nephews. My 3 older sisters are all married, and then I have 2 younger sisters. Um, and
So you're
I,
number
I'm number 4 of 6.
four of six, and all girls.
Yes, and actually my 2 little sisters are adopted. So that is definitely a unique dynamic.
It is. So you're
But
the last of the biological, but the
yes.
first with the oldest sister, like the one next in line, and then there's two adopted girls
Yeah.
underneath you.
Yep. Yep. So, I do still live at home, and that's also fun because I'm growing up with my 2 younger sisters where my older sisters are out of the house.
So right now you kind of have the role of the firstborn, technically, the firstborn in the house. You're the oldest at home.
Yes, which then you toe that line of being the big sister and also hearing the commentary of "You're not my mom."
Right,
So
right. Well, let me ask you this. Um, being the fourth and having older sisters, did everybody kind of adapt the culture of work really hard and do everything that needs to be done and work on the farm and give your best? Or do you feel like that's more unique to you?
I I feel like so my 2 older sisters are actually married to farmers. But I do think that they are better at resting. And then my third sister is not super involved in the farm and agriculture stuff and is really good at resting. So I think it's a little unique as me. To me, I think I adopted it as a coping mechanism a little bit, just when difficult things happened. And so I'm going through the dating world and stuff and that kind of thing. And when a situation went wrong, instead of sitting and processing through it, I'd work and go.
Yeah.
So I think I
Again,
slowly
tuning
adjusted
out
it.
instead of tuning in.
Yeah, a little bit.
And that seems to be your MO, whether tuning out with work, tuning out with exercise. Maybe you can think of other things that you do to tune out instead of tune in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think the key lies for you. How do you have balance with this area of your life or any of these areas? I think for you, it will probably end up starting with the last rhythm in soul care because they're not necessarily in any sort of order. It's just, it is what it is, right? So, but for you, the last one I write about is tune in. And I think if you're able to learn, like you said earlier, that your body is actually sending you signals. And how to respond to the body's signals is to tune in, to listen, and to respond versus let me just do something else to block this out, ignore it, do something that's a little bit more distracting so I don't have to deal with it, push through. So you're almost rewriting the way that you've done things for many years instead of just blocking it out, tuning in, but not just tuning in. Oh, this is terrible. I feel horrible. Responding to those feelings. Jesus was really good at tuning in to how he felt and responding to those feelings. When he felt exhausted, he responded by setting boundaries. When he felt sad, he responded by starting to thank God, being grateful, changing his mindset, you know? So Jesus had all of these emotions, but he was aware of them, tuned into them, and responded to them in healthy ways. And I think if you're able to kind of start practicing the rhythm of tuning in, it'll help you balance all the other things. And I also think, like we talked about in the beginning, starting to really unpack that mentality. We could call it the farm life mentality of just pushing through, getting through discomfort, ignoring, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I'm sick, I'm dot, 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 and just pushing through. I always say what serves you in one season of life can sabotage you in another. What serves you in one area can sabotage you in another. And I think it goes with a lot of different jobs um, where you kind of have to block certain things out to cope, but then you just get used to blocking them out in every area of your life, even when it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at least we found your starting point
Yeah, for sure.
as far as what's next. And for you being acutely aware of how you feel throughout the day, observing it, and then asking yourself, okay, here's the signal. How do I respond to it? What is this signal telling me? What do I need before it builds and builds and builds and builds and then comes up in an emotional explosion of some sort
Mm-hmm.
or a anxiety attack or depression or addiction or over exercise or whatever, fatigue, exhaustion.
Yeah, definitely.
So what do you think next steps are going to look like for you practically? What's your takeaway?
I think practically is just instead of pushing it to the back to tune into what is going on. I also think with your soul care thing of tuning in will also help me to create better boundaries and just making sure to be intentional to make time to fill myself instead of just trying to push to the next thing.
Right. And to see that filling as an act of worship, like when we
Yeah.
fill up and honor our human capacity, we can do a better job of pouring out. When we're shining brightly, we can do more for God than when we're snuffed out and burnt out and depleted. So
Mhm.
it's an act of obedience You know, a lot of this is going to go back to you kind of changing those underlying belief systems. Is this coming from my culture and my background or from God's truth? And
Yeah.
starting to tweak those things when they don't align.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I'm
just trying to
excited for
figure.
you.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think there definitely needs to be a change in the area.
If you can
That's for
get this
sure.
right at your age, how old are you?
25.
If you can get this right now, man, you are setting yourself up for success in so many areas, in your relationships, in your success, because you're pouring out of your fullness, out of your overflow, rather than out of your emptiness. It's going to save you so much grief, so much heartache, so many health issues if you could get this right in this season of life.
Yeah, I haven't thought that far.
I believe it. But thank you for sharing. I think this is a really good question for those who do end up overcompensating in one area and it starts to feel unhealthy, to kind of assess, okay, how do I keep this in balance by making sure that I'm practicing the other areas, boundaries, rest, healthy connections, tuning in, enjoying life. When those things get out of balance, you start to feel it. So I
Mhm.
think a lot of people will really resonate with that. And thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story. Next up on your reading list, Emily, soul
Oh,
care.
definitely. I am getting it.
I'm excited to hear your thoughts as you go through and how it begins to impact your mindset as well as your behaviors. So keep me posted.
Oh, will do.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah.